Welcome back to Unapologetically Visible, the podcast for high achieving Latina and women of color founders who are done being the best kept secret. I'm your host, Christina Olivarez, award winning leadership and visibility coach, TEDx speaker, and founder and CEO of the Social Butterfly Gal. We are kicking off year 2 of the podcast, and I wanted to start off with a little bit of a bang. I recently spoke at the virtual Speaker Movement Conference this summer. I led a breakout session called The Voice Economy: How to Monetize Your Voice Utilizing Data. As I was thinking of how I wanted to open year 2, I kept coming back to this breakout session and the one question that so many of you have: what actually makes my voice economically valuable? So today on the podcast, I am sharing the entire breakout session with you. Without further ado, here's the breakout session. Hello, everyone. I am absolutely honored and thrilled to be speaking at this event. I have a treat for you today. We are going to be diving into the voice economy, how to monetize your story and your perspective and your presence, and diving into how you can be utilizing data in order to do so. If you are just joining me for the very first time, I am Christina Olivarez. I am an award-winning visibility and leadership coach and TEDx speaker. I have worked with thousands of Latina and women of color founders over the 11 years of my company. And my work is in the intersection of authority building, personal branding, and leadership development. And I'm really, really honored and thrilled to be part of this event and going through this incredible breakout session. So I want to start first with what we will focus on today, which we are going to be focusing on 3 main things. The first is repositioning your voice as a monetizable asset, shifting from using your voice only to market your offers, but to really position your perspective and your leadership as the value in itself. And then we are going to be identifying where your voice might be under leverage or very diluted, clarifying how you present your story and your deep perspective, and giving an idea of how your presence plays a role in building the know, like, trust factor, especially with authority building and making faster buying decisions for your audience. And then, excuse me, we are going to be aligning your platforms and the data with your strengths and determining where your voice carries the most authority. So let's dive in. So I want you to first think about this specific question. Where does your voice currently live online right now? Are you creating blogs or LinkedIn articles or doing a lot of writing? Are you doing a lot of video or talk to camera or maybe audio with podcasts? Are you speaking on stages? Where are you positioning your own voice right now? Or are you not consistent with it? And what I mean by consistent, I mean there's no solid game plan of where your voice is actually living. You're just kind of showing up at random times, and there's not a one distinct part or platform that your voice might be on. So I want you to just start thinking about that. This question is going to be carried throughout our time together, but I really just want you to start thinking about where your voice is currently live right now. So if your voice disappeared tomorrow, would your income disappear as well? This is a very solid question that I always love to start, because we know that you are visible. We know many founders are visible already online. It doesn't even matter if you are showing up on camera. You have a platform, you have an account, a social media account, you have your brand. And a lot of the times, many founders are very visible, but their revenue is not really anchored to their voice. And what I mean by that is, if you were to maybe stop launching or just stop showing up online or in person, then that's when you start noticing that your income is dipping. And maybe if your referrals dip, then your revenue dips as well. So if you aren't actively promoting and selling or discounting, nothing is really moving. It's just kind of there. And so that means that your revenue is really tied to activity spikes and not so much the body of work, the intellectual property that you are building that is yours alone. So your IP and your own authority. So the core distinction is this. When your revenue is anchored to your voice, people buy because of how you think. They do not need a launch to remember you. They don't need a webinar. They don't even need like a 5-step process to remember your brand. They already understand who you are because your voice is doing the work. So if I were to not even post for a couple of days or not even launch anything, my voice still carries throughout the different rooms that I'm a part of because of the fact that I have a body of work, and anybody could go online right now and find my work, my IP on the internet, that the voice, my voice, is going to be doing the work. And so I want you to start thinking, kind of going back to that original question where we asked, where's your voice currently online? Thinking about if your voice were to disappear tomorrow, would your income disappear as well? So what is the voice economy? We are hearing that all the time, where trust is at an all-time low. We know that right now in June and July of 2026, we are going through a trust recession, which means that buyers are really making longer decisions of who they want to invest in. Other opportunities where it comes to your voice, your speaking, it's taking a while for people to understand what they want to put their dollars to. And there's this level of like, I don't know if I trust you. And that's where the voice economy comes in. So we are no longer competing in that information economy. Information is abundant. I can go to ChatGPT or Claude right now, and within 10 seconds, I could probably find the information that I'm wanting to have when it comes to a specific strategy, when it comes to content ideation, when it comes to anything that's like a step-by-step process. Everyone has access, and we are operating in that. However, the voice economy is something very, very different. It is all about you and your voice and your intellectual property. So we know that people are not paying you for information. Like I said, we could easily go to ChatGPT or Claude and get the information that we need. They are paying you because you know how to think under pressure. You know how to make decisions in uncertainty, how you frame the complexity into clarity, how you see those patterns, and how you filter the noise into actual tangible direction for them to actually take action. So your voice becomes profitable when it consistently reduces confusion, shortens decision cycles, and creates cognitive relief. Your voice starts becoming that infrastructure. So there are 3 monetizable layers of our voice. So number 1 is story. We always hear this from time to time, and I think Steph has even mentioned about when you're creating your speaker reels, when you're creating your own property, your body of work, if I like to call it, we always start first with our story. So the story is that emotional access. It is where people enter your world, they get a sense of who you are. And if they kind of relate, if they see yourself. And when we think about this, a lot of the times when we're watching a really juicy movie, we get tied into the stories, or even TV shows, we get tied into the stories of the characters, and we start relating our own lives to their own lives, which they're fictional characters. But when you start implementing your story into your voice, when you share your journey, all of your mistakes, your growth, your culture, any turning points, you lower the resistance. And so story starts building that emotional resonance. It doesn't automatically build the authority, but we kind of see like, hey, I'm starting to build a little bit of trust with the person. People are thinking about, if I'm going to trust this person, can I trust this person fully because of their lived experience? And most people are buying proximity to your experience. So anytime I think about working with a coach or working with a consultant, working with somebody that I know probably is a couple of steps ahead of me, maybe they're like 4 or 5 steps ahead of me, I know that I can invest in their experience in their story because they have that lived experience and I'm getting firsthand proximity to their experience. So what does this build? It really helps us to be able to monetize at an access level and very scalable offers. So this layer of story really manifests in being able to sell low ticket memberships, digital products, courses, affiliate partnerships, brand deals, community-based offers, and entry-level workshops, and even book sales. Then we start thinking about perspective, which is the second monetizable layer. So when we think about perspective, that is obviously your thinking. That is how you interpret your story. It's the conclusions that you've drawn, and not creating strategy from theory, but actually creating strategy from the frameworks that you have, from the ability to draw your hypothesis and conclusion, very scientific-y. So this is the conclusions that you've drawn, the standards that you now hold, and your perspective has to answer this question. What does your experience matter beyond you? So if I'm going to invest in you, if I'm going to implement a lot more of my dollars into you, then I really have to know if your perspective is what is going to differentiate you from another person with a similar story, expertise, you name it. So perspective really shortens the buyer circle, the buyer gap, and it shortens the gap between inspiration and implementation. People really pay other people because they trust your interpretation. And I feel this across the board, especially with any speaking opportunities that you might have. If you do paid speaking opportunities, I know a lot of people say that they want to get paid. And the best way to get paid for a speaking engagement is to provide your perspective. And so this perspective equals your intellectual authority, which it builds that credibility and the differentiation between you and someone else. And it helps us monetize from a mid-tier and intellectual authority, which manifests in group programs, master classes, certifications, paid speaking, paid workshops, mid-ticket one-on-one coaching containers, retainers, and thought leadership speaking. And then the third monetizable layer is story, perspective, and your presence. So your presence is your regulation. It is your emotional maturity. It is what is going to make you stand out from the crowd with your voice. So when I think about putting these all together, that is where your story builds the connection and your perspective builds the authority and your presence builds safety with the buyers so that they don't hesitate. Like I said, we are in a trust recession right now, and more people are wanting to make confident buying decisions because they understand fully who they are investing in, from a speaker side to a coach, you name it. They want to know, like, and trust you so that they can be able to exchange, put their dollars into your hands. So people are making investments from discernment. They're looking at all of the ways that you hold the complexity. And when I think about this is all of this together really builds that demand, the authority. And this is monetized best where it manifests is high ticket proximity. I start thinking about high level coaching, private advisory, VIP days, premium speaking engagements like those keynotes that you really want, strategic partnerships, and any type of like high level, high ticket mastermind. So where does your voice belong? I am a very data-driven person. And when we talk about data, when we understand bits and pieces of how can we look at our data to create really great strategic thinking and strategic planning, I always think about how can I align my voice with the right platform for the result that I'm wanting to have. So I look at all of the different platforms that you're on and thinking about all of the different formats. So we have podcasting, which is audio, and we have writing. So when I look at the data, I know that my audience in particular really gravitates to my voice when it comes to an audio level and when it comes to being on camera, one-to-one. So let's talk first about podcasting and what that does for you. So audio really builds a deep trust because it creates that psychological proximity. We always hear, and social media does this as well, but we always kind of hear like those parasocial relationships. Podcasting automatically is the number one way to have a parasocial relationship with somebody that you end up wanting to hire because audio builds that intimacy and the intellectual authority over time. So when I start listening to somebody's podcast, I feel like they're in my living room. I feel like we are on the couch with a cup of cafecito and we are gossiping, but we're gossiping about business and we're gossiping about everything. And that's because people are really hearing how you think. They feel your regulation and they start sitting with your nuance. And so thinking about that, when you're thinking about podcasting, I want you just kind of to look at the data and see where's your audience really gravitating to? Like, where do they say that they are building that trust? And when we think about audio, if you are creating and building something, the audio format is a really great way to support one-on-one coaching. It's great to support VIP days and advisory retainers, very high trust group containers, maybe like a mastermind, and paid speaking invitations. So anytime I'm looking for a speaker for a group coaching opportunity or an event that I might be hosting, I look at, do they have a podcast? Are they specifically sharing their thinking? It could be even on a podcast or it could be on an Instagram live, but are they actively sharing their perspective? So I always think about that and having that and looking at the data to see where your audience is gravitating to and how you can create specific content in alignment to the platforms. So the second one is writing, which writing is not dead. Blogging is not dead. In fact, any type of writing will help populate in Claude and in ChatGPT and still in Google. But when I think about writing, I think about LinkedIn articles, email newsletters, digital articles you might be featured in, because writing is very authority led and it creates like think-based offers. So writing really rewards precision and clarity. It attracts buyers who really value discernment and structure and thought structure, like masterclasses, paid workshops, strategic intensives, executive level coaching, consulting, and premium advising. So I would suggest that if you're kind of looking to see if you want to get into the writing bug, I would start first with maybe a LinkedIn newsletter because that allows for SEO. So your LinkedIn articles will be found on Google. And it's just a really great way to also build that authority-led thinking in addition to a podcast. The next one is one that I feel a lot of us here are participating in because we all want to get on stages. We all want to speak. And so I think about high ticket proximity and brand elevation comes from speaking. So speaking actually collapses your trust timelines. So when you look at it in the funnel,
For many people, their speaking is often their main revenue driver. That is their main business model. But if you have a really different business model, if you are a coaching-based business, or if you just use speaking to develop your funnel, then it's going to be structured in a very different way because you're not, yes, you're making money off of speaking, but it's not your whole entire business model. And so speaking is going to support maybe private coaching or VIP days or masterminds, anything that's like a high ticket offer where your audience is going to be experiencing you for the very first time and they're feeding off of your energy and they're going to want to invest in more. So thinking about too, like, are your clients coming from speaking? Are they coming from the stages that you're on? And if they're not, that's where you have to adjust your strategy. And the last one is video and social media. So this is your entry point. I think for a lot of us, we are meeting each other because we either follow each other on social media or we just are watching your content and watching your videos. So this is where immediately video builds that emotional connection. We know that it works really well for entry-level workshops, waitlists, audience growth, shop launches, and that relationship warming. Steph and I met through video. We met through Threads, actually. But it's one of those things where we know that if we are creating video content, we're getting a sneak peek into our own brands and we're building the know, like, trust from that. So here is the shift to be able to monetize from your voice. It's instead of asking, how do I grow? Thinking about how do I better position my voice for those opportunities? You can start monetizing your voice the moment these three things are pretty much true. So you have a lived perspective. You've already had some lived experience. You've already mastered a couple of things that you're teaching on. You can articulate that very well. You have a high level way of articulating your messaging, and someone finds relief in how you think. So if you've ever had somebody say, oh my goodness, because I listened to your video or I listened to your podcast or I saw you on so-and-so's conference or so-and-so's virtual summit, if they automatically found relief in how you think, that's when you know, all right, I can start monetizing that. And when. So when your story has been interpreted, if you can extract frameworks, patterns, lessons, or standards of life or work, then you start building your intellectual property. When people are starting to ask you for clarity, I want you to pay attention to those signals. How many DMs are you getting where somebody's asking you to pick your brain or they have a couple of questions? That's a right time to where, all right, people are starting to like want to work with you. So let's start monetizing it. And then when you can really hold a good point of view. So if you can have a proven transformation, an actual result that a person has from point A to point B, that framework right there is really time to start monetizing that voice. Early monetization really looks like maybe paid workshops, having a signature talk, giving a masterclass, doing a virtual summit like this, a 90-minute intensive, consulting calls, private advisory container, right? Mature monetization is definitely high ticket coaching, retainer packages, executive advisory, invite only programs, strategic partnerships, brand deals, books, paid newsletters, and very IP driven content and products. So as we leave today's session, I want you to go back to the original question that I had asked at the beginning of this presentation, thinking about where your voice is being lived online, and then thinking about this next couple of questions. So number one, where is your voice being under leverage? Number two, does my current platform strategy actually monetize my thinking? And number three, what would change if I position my voice as the asset? And then final question is, what does owning my voice, story, and perspective look like for me in this current moment?
If you resonated with this episode, here's what I want you to do next. Subscribe and leave a review. because that helps this podcast reach more women like us, women who were never meant to stay hidden, women who are meant to be highly visible leaders. Share this episode with someone you love who is wanting to monetize their voice, and DM me on Instagram at the Social Butterfly Gal. Tell me your biggest reframe and your biggest breakthrough from today's conversation. And if you're feeling the call to go deeper, to recalibrate your personal brand, leadership, and your visibility, I would love to support you through one-on-one coaching. You can find the coaching information and offers and the links in the show notes below, or send me a DM with the word coaching, and I will personally walk you through what offers are in alignment with your current season and what it looks like to step into this next era with clarity, confidence, and unapologetic authority. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening and for all of the shares and reviews. Remember this, you didn't come this far to play safe. You came here to be unapologetically visible. I'll see you next week.